go. All right, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking About Survivor. Back on video. Da-da-da.
Yeah.
I'm Christiana Ellis.
I'm Mike McTeen.
Tonight, we're going to talk about episode 12 of Survivor Season 33 and bid farewell to a player that provided a lot of entertainment and pretty good play, although I think his assessment of his game at the end was pretty much right on, which was that he pressed a little, once he started making his move, he pressed a little too hard.
Yes. I tend to agree that he, while I liked him, he was deserving to be voted off this time. And I think we talked about that a little bit last time, that was our concern with the way, with building those divisions is, well, now you've established yourself as the leader of one of the divisions, and that's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, exactly, and I think just his instinct to try to make people afraid to go after him by turning on people so quickly, like he did with David, like he did with Hannah, I think people started to see how hard he was playing. You know, it's one thing for him to sort of be the casual leader. It's another thing to express some slight disagreement and all of a sudden he's after you.
Right. Yeah, he definitely, he was a threat in more ways than one, you know. Like he was actually threatening you.
Yeah, because there are certainly times in this game where people are voted out for all sorts of reasons other than being a threat to win, but that's exactly what was happening with him, is that people started saying, hey, he's playing a really strong game, and the only real weakness to it is that it became so obvious how strong his game was.
Yes.
You know, he was not sufficiently camouflaged for being still a few episodes away from the end.
Right. Well, and I think even more than just a threat to win the game, like he was actually a threat to vote you off if you disagreed with him. Like he was a threat in different ways, as well as being a threat to win.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, a little dog under my desk. So, in any case, let's rewind back to the beginning of the episode. I couldn't help but notice that we had a super short recap this time. Maybe I only noticed just because we'd had some longer ones the last couple of episodes. But this time it was like 10 seconds.
Yeah, I just didn't. I was watching on my computer in a hotel room, so I was watching I was kind of, trying to get settled at that point. So
sometimes they don't even show the recaps when you're watching online, but
that's true. I mean, I may have, I don't have any notes on it, so I may have shown it. Yeah.
I didn't have any note except that it seemed really short compared to, normal. So we started, though, with Hannah coming out of that tribal council, finding it very stressful, feeling very guilty about it, and I'm thinking, all of those are very reasonable and rational emotional responses to have after all of that. To have, you be one of the two names that's the tie that causes all that havoc, and then to see Jessica go out essentially,
supporting you
from a certain point of view because she supported you. And that's stressful.
Yes.
We have David trying to reassure her, but also at the same time feeling bummed that he ended up accidentally playing his idol on the wrong person. So it's kind of wasted.
Yep.
Well, and not only that, but, as we talked about last time, if it was such a solid tie before and he was on the losing side and is now down a person, that doesn't look good. And now he doesn't have an idol and everyone knows he doesn't have an idol.
Correct.
all bad news for David this time. Although, that's the nature of this game, is that often it has this weird rebound effect where if it goes too badly for you, that almost makes you not the target anymore sometimes.
Yeah.
Because people start feeling like, well, you're defanged. We can get you off at any time now or something.
Well, yeah, especially with the, with Zeke playing so hard, like he took all the heat right off of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and plus we had Will just get all full of himself this time. Just deciding now is the time that people needed to start respecting him. God darn it. I mean, I don't blame him necessarily. I'm just saying, at the same time, there was a little bit of a flavor of the 18-year-old is an adult now, and people better start treating him like it, or else he'll get mad.
Yeah, he was kind of a wild card.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens next time. The preview indicates that he is drunk with power.
I could see that.
Yeah. But in any case, though, Zeke, by contrast to David and Hannah, is feeling pretty good about how that whole tribal council went. And I'm thinking, be careful. It was really close there. It ended up drawing rocks, and that is literally the only reason that you ended up on top. Now, that said, it was also very exciting, so we could sense him. We could imagine him being just energized by how exciting and tense it was. He likes that part of the game.
Yeah. I mean, he was definitely, thriving off of that. So, mm-hmm. And the fact that it worked out well for him made him very pleased.
Yeah. And he's just talking about how he thinks Brett, Will, and Jay all seem to really have his back in a very solid way, so he's very confident. And I got spoiled that it was Zeke who got voted out, and so I'm watching this scene thinking, this is all very ironic and very typical of Survivor editing. I was really annoyed that I got spoiled. It's just one of those things, but I mean, it's not like it ruins the episode or anything, but I felt like the person who ended up spoiling me should have known better. Anyway. Although, I suppose there's a certain element. See, the problem is I can almost never watch it on the night that it happens because I've been doing so many levels now on Wednesdays. So I'm literally doing something else when it's on. And so I got spoiled on Thursday morning after the episode on Twitter. But oh well. Anyway, so watching Zeke talk about how confident he was, I was just thinking, even if I hadn't been spoiled, that's exactly the sort of setup that the editors like to give us sometimes of, someone is very confident. The game's going great for them. Everything's going their way. Time is on their side. Whoops.
Right. But, yeah, though it could have gone completely the other way, though, because, say Will had decided to stick with them,
mm-hmm.
This still would have led, or say Will was never even, seriously considering going against them. This would have helped us, really generate that drama.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was a foregone conclusion, Yeah,
well, sometimes it's a red herring, you're right.
Yeah.
But in any case, we have Ken receiving the legacy advantage from Jessica, and he's very grateful, and we get him talking about wanting to make a new life for him and his daughter, and the thought has crossed my mind before, but this was one of, when sometimes people talk about people getting a winner's edit, that scene was one of the sorts of scenes that people get when they're getting a winner's edit. I wouldn't say he's been getting one up till now, but
well, and the funny thing is, so I wrote the note, just like you received the legacy advantage, but then I was looking back at it and I started, did he remind us what it is? Because I don't actually remember what happens.
He did remind us, but all we know is that whoever has it on day 36 gets an advantage.
Okay, that's why I don't remember what it is, because we don't know what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I would guess that the advantage element of it is pretty standard to what we've seen in the past, which is like they get to skip the first stage of a challenge or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's straightforward in that way. And then having just the legacy element be the twist of it.
And the legacy element is the fact that you can, like, that someone for sure gets it, right? Because you
will it to somebody. Yeah. And as of right now, I think Ken is probably the only one who knows about it, because Jessica had it and Ken was the only person she told, as far as we know.
So that's good for him.
Yeah. So we head to where the challenge is going to be, and sure enough, it's the loved one's visit. We get lots of emotion, and it's all nice. I don't necessarily have a lot to say about all of it, but at the same time, I feel like I sometimes read, comments on commentaries for these, and people don't like these, and I feel like we have this conversation every season that they have one of these. But I like them. It's nice.
I thought it was great. I was all emotioned on this one. I think it was like particularly like, which again, like the editing probably had something to do with it, but like Zeke's that one was really powerful for me.
Yeah.
Like when his father said like how he looks up to him because of like, like whatever he calls him, like his superhero or something like that, because of what he's been able to do, Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of good ones. We had Brett crying even though he said that he wasn't going to. Hannah being more like she's comforting her mom, being so emotional rather than the other way around. And then of course I think the sort of the most game significant moment was Adam. Adam's brother telling him, Mom's okay, at least for now. And then Adam, all teary-eyed, promising to everybody that if he loses, he won't use his advantage for this reward. And I was just thinking to myself, wow, Adam, you actually did the best possible thing that you could have in your situation with that. Before the challenge, promised everybody that you won't use it, and then of course following through on.
Yes, that was amazing. There's some like strange beeping noise coming from my house. Hold on real quick. I want to go see if I can figure out what this was.
So just while Mike is checking out the mystery beeping, the idea that we talked in the previous episodes about how the dumbest thing that Adam could possibly do with that type of an advantage is to steal the loved one thing, just because if anything is going to turn people against you and make them see you as mean or cruel or selfish or whatever, it would be to do that. Whether there's any rationality to it or not, I mean, the only rationality is the predictable nature of the emotional response that would cause. And so certainly that would have been a bad move. And in fact, when Taylor was going out before, his whole thing was telling people that that's what Adam would do. And so, of course, he's set up, and I'm sure everybody did have a little bit of anxiety about that possibility. So for him to go out and promise not to use it, I mean, not only does he still have it, but he assuages everybody's anxiety a little bit. And although I don't think that it was his intention to provoke this reaction, in gratitude, he actually got to have his loved one visit after all. Because, as a thanks for declaring it in advance. Because it's one thing to, after the challenge, for him to decide not to use it. But to promise ahead of time was absolutely the right move. And I think it was 100% sincere. But at the same time, from a strategic point of view, it was also absolutely the best thing that he could do. It was great. And so, welcome back. Did you identify the mystery beep?
Yes, this clock that we keep usually in our guest bedroom has like an old school like alarm. And I guess I was moving boxes yesterday. We hadn't unpacked this yet. And the alarm is a little button that you turn on. So I think when I shifted the box, it must have like pushed that button, and the alarm is set for this time in the evening. And so it was buried in a box, just making this like, it's like an old school alarm. So it's like this beep, 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 you know, like a aggressive beep.
Yeah.
And it was buried in a box. Yeah.
I could see not wanting to leave that alone if you don't know what it is.
Yeah. So Abby was like, I don't know what that is. I hope it's not like some detector or something. And then we found it was in the box, and so we just pulled it out. But yeah, sorry for the diversion, but that was an odd.
No problem. I was just elaborating a little bit on the strategy of promising ahead of the challenge not to use it, rather than just waiting until he lost. Because if he had turned out to be one of the winners, then people could have still always had in their head this idea that he might have used it if he had lost. But promising ahead of time just gives him a lot more credit for it.
Yes, and I'll add to whatever. I don't know, obviously know what you said, but I'm sure it was very well thought out and in depth and covered most of it. So the only thing that I would, from my perspective, I was very hard on him the last couple episodes about playing very poorly. This was his best play of yet, and gave me hope that, you know, he just started to play a lot better. And then when he goes on to win the immunity, like his game, just like we saw David's take a turn. I think his game took a turn, and this was the starting point. Like he realized that, you know, he kind of got into his groove the same way that David did. You know, they were both very erratic and kind of oddballs at the beginning, and now they've sort of found their rhythm.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
How they're going to play the game. Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely had been erratic is the right word, I think. You know, in the last few episodes, but I definitely found myself for the first time in a while thinking of him as someone who's playing well in this episode.
Yes.
Certainly, this was a big gesture that made a big difference, and of course, you know, like he couldn't have planned it this way, and I don't think it was anything but sincere when he made the move to begin with. But you know, to get a thank you participation in the loved one reward, after all, even after losing.
Yeah, it showed that it had an effect. Yeah, and this was just such a better way to play that than, you know, oh, well, you know, you were hiding food. Well, you have a secret reward. Well, you know, you were doing this, and that just made him look sketchy and
exactly
erratic, you know, and now it was very much like, hey, I have it. I know everybody was worried about it. I will not use it. Just so everybody can be secure in that. You know, just a great, even keel, well thought out and delivered moment. So,
the only other note I had about the actual bits where everybody was getting to see their loved one was when Ken's brother comes out and Hannah is like whispering to Zeke, he's like, "Oh my God, they're both so handsome," and Zeke's like, "I know."
Yeah,
that's pretty funny. So the reward is to get to bring your loved one back to camp for a barbecue, and it's a single challenge, but you know, I think it's pretty predictable. We're seeing ahead that whoever wins is going to get to pick at least one other person. That's how it typically goes, because it's interesting that way.
Yes.
And Ken is in the lead for a while.
I said both because it's more interesting to, you know, have to make them pick, and also that's more interesting when more loved ones get to participate. They're always odd, and those ones where it's like, oh, just this one person comes back to camp, you know, and I think they may have only done that once or twice because it was so awkward. Like, it's just like,
well, it runs the risk of becoming something like people just get jealous, and it could almost be like a handicap in the game aspect if it's one person. But when it's a couple of people, it's a little harder to have that jealousy turn into changing your target in the game. But in any case, Ken was in the lead for a while, but ultimately Jay won. It was a tethered obstacle course, which is pretty standard fare for the challenges, but it's always kind of fun watching people get tangled up and that sort of thing. Because especially just flipping over those hurdles, and if you just accidentally come down on the wrong side of the rope and don't realize it right away, you can really, that'll really slow you down.
Yeah.
So in any case, he gets to pick a first person, and he says he made an early promise to pick Will, so he does. And he gets to pick one more person, and he picks Sunday, who made a promise to him first. And then he gets to pick one more. And so Adam gets picked, but he's also the third pick, which, you wouldn't necessarily guarantee that many people would get it, right? Although there was a part of me, because of the way Probst always announces one at a time, I wonder if there was an element of, like, we would like him to pick Adam because of the additional significance there. So let's see how many opportunities we have to give him before he'll pick Adam. I mean, I don't think they would have kept going. I think 3 is probably as high as they would have gone. But I wonder if it was 3 instead of 2 because they were hoping he would pick Adam as number 3.
That's an interesting. I hadn't thought of that. I could see them doing that. They are pretty good at not only calling audibles but prepping for them. So
yeah, well, definitely, just the way that it's all presented would absolutely make it possible for them to do that, right? It's like, you are the winner, and you get to pick one person. And he picks one person. All right, and one more person. And he picks that person. It's like, all right, and one more person. It's like he doesn't start by saying you get to pick 3 more people. They like to have the suspense of each choice being made not knowing if there's going to be another or not.
Well, and
it makes it more interesting.
For our benefit, and part of that's also for the castaway is like, oh, well, you better pick the most important next person now, just in case. If they're like 3 people, then you can kind of equal foot like the best 3. But on this one, like, an emotional one, it's just, it really draws out like, okay, what, you may only have this one more. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you still may only have this one. What are you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. You can't hedge and say, oh, well, yeah. So.
Yeah. So the only real scene we got with the loved ones at camp is Adam hearing from his brother it's complicated. I was going to say bad news, but it's kind of complicated in the way that illnesses can be, which is that the treatments don't seem to be working. It's bad news, but at the same time, lots of times the treatments make people feel so bad that it might just eat up the last few months they have feeling terrible all the time. Whereas if you stop, then at least you feel more okay for a little while. And that's some painful stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to necessarily weigh down the podcast with too much discussion of that stuff because it's real world stuff, and I'm glad they talked about it on the show. It's part of what makes the loved ones visits so engaging and so much an important part of the show, I think, to have this touchstone of what these people's lives are like at home. Because we meet them as they are embarking on this adventure in completely outside of their normal everyday life. And it's something we've talked about a lot on the show, about how it's straining enough that it's difficult to maintain a facade, and so you tend to act on the show probably kind of how you really are as a person. But we still only see them in this artificial circumstance. So what is their life really like at home? And, you know, so sometimes, like, for example, when there's a player that we don't like very much because they're a jerk all the time on the island, but then we see that, like, oh, but then their brother comes and, you know, hey, they're actually, you know, someone loves them, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And then, of course, sometimes you get these really, you know, humanizing moments like this one.
Yep. I think you summed it up as good, as well as it can be. So I'm not going to say something for the sake of saying something.
Sure. So in any case, though, as a thanks to picking him, Adam decides to give the advantage to Jay, which I thought was interesting because, again, like promising not to use the advantage to steal this reward, I think that it was made sincerely and it's not a cynical gesture. And yet, at this point, with how much of a thing that this advantage made, it made him almost like it was almost a handicap he was having to lug around with him. Whereas now he gets to gift it to someone else, where for them it will be a nice thing, and now he doesn't have it around his neck anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it felt more like a purge than
it really did.
Anything else. Like, I need to rid myself of this. I can't do anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is just baggage for me. Like, let me get rid of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought that was really interesting that it functioned simultaneously as a nice sentimental gesture and also good strategic play and also an emotional catharsis for him.
Yes.
It was all three of those things at once, which was interesting.
Well, and it has a couple levels of good strategic play. Not only does it, you know, buy him even further capital with Jay, who has just started to warm to him by saying, hey, my man could have used this and he didn't, so I'm going to bring him. Like, so they start to build this connection, and then he says, hey, I appreciate that. And so he furthers their connection. That's the number one strategic play. Mm-hmm. But the other is, which he probably, I don't know if he was thinking about this at the time, but it could also serve to make Jay a target later if Jay uses it.
Yeah.
And say there's some dispute of who's going, like, it could, you know, he can kind of push him like, hey, I gave that to Jay and he did everything that y'all were scared I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden people are like, yeah, you know, and you said you weren't going to use it, which was the right way to do it. And then Jay went and used it. Mm-hmm. He's bad. Let's get rid of him. You know, like, it could, he could shift that target to Jay if he so chose. You know, but that's sort of a back pocket kind of thing.
Right. Know? Well, and even if it never comes to that, like, either Jay never uses it or it becomes a scenario where he wouldn't want to throw Jay under the bus for it. It was still something that, like, Adam was never going to be able to use it without getting criticized for it because it had been set up that way.
Right.
And so he basically was thinking, like, all having this gives me is people feeling anxious every time I lose a reward challenge about me. So, like, that doesn't help me. And if I use it, it's worse. So it's really a negative for me right now, but it could be a positive for you. So here you go.
Well, yeah, and if you think about, like, the emotional catharsis of just even the stuff we don't see, you know, because, like, put yourself in the shoes of the people there and how much downtime they have sometimes where they're just kind of on their own, in their own thoughts, which we forget a lot until we see things like when Michaela, who, she created that whole like plan.
Yeah, that was Michaela.
Yeah, to get to the end. Like all of a sudden, like sometimes you see things like, oh yeah, like that's what happens when you just like have to sit there and think about stuff on your own. And so put yourself in his shoes. That's what he's thinking about a lot of the time is, can I use this? What are situations where I could use this? How do I use this correctly? I can't use this. Can I? What do I do with it if I can't use it? Do I just sit here with it? Like it's an advantage. And like, it's just like, it's probably occupying his thoughts more than being able to actually play the game correctly. And so, he, by ridding himself of it, it's not just the baggage of it existing, it's the clearing of his thought process going into the late part of the game to not even have to consider what to do with that. So it was just a nice next step, like in his evolution of becoming a good player. He
right. Well,
he makes the right decision before he clears himself of it. Is it related to the reason why he won? Because now his head's clear and he's refocused? Maybe, maybe not, but it couldn't hurt.
Yeah. Well, certainly the whole thing with seeing his brother and everything, hearing about his mom, kind of lit a fire under him and provoked him to make something happen, and it was successful. Right,
and as we see, as we know, which again, part of the fun of the show is the social experimentation. We talk about this ad nauseum. But this is a great example of, in reality, when you're dealing with human beings and human events, cause and effect are rarely one-to-one.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, you did this and that's why this happened. So it's a combination of seeing his brother, clearing his mind, getting some momentum from making good plays to actually having some skill at this particular challenge. You can't say it was one or the other. Like, and that's part of the fun of this. Is that's how real life is. It's not.
Yeah.
It's
kind of like how fun it was when it worked out that David won the last time, right?
Right.
On that day when it seemed like he had kind of had an emotional breakthrough.
Exactly. And it's the same thing as like going to, win a championship game. Like, you can't say if you practice X number of hours on this skill set, then you will be the best at it and you will win the championship. Like, yes, you need to do that, but did you get enough sleep the night before? Did you get into a fight with your significant other? Like, those things, like, they all kind of connect. And that's what we sort of saw. What we did see with Adam here is that all of the cards got dealt his way, and he played them correctly and ended up making good moves and winning immunity because of that. So
yeah. So it was a hell of an episode for Adam.
Yeah, not so much for Zeke.
No. So in any case, before we get to the immunity challenge, that we have Adam now motivated, confiding in David. I think Zeke can win, and David's like, yeah, I think so too. Let's do something about it. And then we also, you know what? I have a note that was wrong, but so it was also Will basically having this motivation as well. So my note was actually about Will, even though Adam was on the same page.
Yeah, Will's the one that really gets kind of riled up about this.
Yeah. So I just misread my note, and we were just talking about Adam. But yeah, so Will also having gotten to see his mom, which makes more sense because my note was actually seeing his mom has lit a fire under his butt. But Adam didn't see his mom. But anyway, so yes, Will is also fired up. Time to make his move. Time to teach all these olds to respect the youngins. And I don't want to be too eye-rolly about him, but at the same time, I just do it. There's a part of me that wanted to just kind of say, I feel that a lot of what he was sensing as disrespect was kind of in his head. Like it was his own security projected outward, his own insecurity projected outward.
Well, yeah, and his mom, not knowingly and not maliciously, contributed to that by what she meant as a very, and was taken as a very positive endorsement of him being young and yet still able to do this, and that nobody thought he'd have a chance, and she's so proud of his ability to come in here. Like, that kind of feeds that, like, well, yeah, I'm playing above my head, and so they're not. If they don't listen to me, it's because they don't respect me, and I should be respected because not my mom said I should be. That's not what he's thinking, but that was a contribution to it. Her nice words are somewhat inflating to him.
Right. But just
when
seeing
meant it was a nice compliment.
Yeah. No, I think you're right on. What we saw, I think, pretty consistently whenever he kind of started expressing that, like towards the end in the tribal council and everything, it seemed like everyone else was kind of having the same reaction of like, where the hell is this coming from? You have not expressed any of this up to this point. That's kind of what I perceived from everybody else of like, you seemed like you were just kind of going along to get along and not really that engaged, and now you say that we haven't been listening to you? Well, you haven't been saying very much. That seemed kind of like the vibe I was getting from more than a few of the people there.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to say, but that was definitely my perception. In any case, though, so Will's talking to David, saying, I think Zeke could win. Gets Adam involved in that, and let's all vote out Zeke this time. And, it's not a bad plan. And I'm thinking at this point in the episode, I like Zeke. I don't really want him to go, but from their perspective, I don't think it was the wrong play at all. Because I absolutely think Zeke was a threat to win. And so from their perspective, they're right to try to get rid of him.
Right, for a number of reasons. I mean, as we already talked about, threat to win, threat to get mad at you and vote you out, but also controlled the majority alliance. So if you're a part of that alliance, then you start thinking just like anything else. Like, unless you feel, which that's, back to the Boston Rob rules, Will, whatever, however he may have expressed it here that we think is a little bit in his own head, what he is expressing is that he does not feel like he is in the finals with Zeke. And Zeke is the leader, clearly, of the majority alliance. He doesn't articulate it that way, but that's essentially what happened. And so, going by, again, the Boston Rob rules, like, you need to keep people feeling like they're not only part of the majority, but part of the majority within the majority. And Will does not feel like that. So, of course, it makes sense for him. And anyone else in that alliance who isn't feeling that way, which is why Adam entertains the idea, or I guess he doesn't even entertain the idea. He plays his idol on Hannah, doesn't he? Yeah. So he supports it. So, all the people who are outsiders on Zeke's alliance are saying, this isn't a good move for me. Like, now you have all the power, and your whole plan is we just vote them off one by one, and then what happens?
Will was one of the people that Zeke said he thought was solid for him at the beginning.
Yep.
Adam was kind of was one of the...
But he didn't make Will feel like he was solid.
Well, yes, exactly. And I think you're... Yeah. I think we're in agreement. We're not really disagreeing on anything. But yeah, Adam's definitely on board with this plan to oust Zeke. In any case, that's where we get to the immunity challenge. It's a pretty straightforward endurance challenge, looking like one that's designed to not last for 2 hours.
Yep.
Unlike some of the others. Although I think some of the others, like I think one of the earlier ones this season, I don't remember which one specifically, I think I remember reading that it's like almost everybody went out after like 15 minutes, and then like 3 people lasted 90 minutes. Something like that. I don't remember which one now. Anyway, David was one of the people who would have liked to win it, and he was first out. And then it ultimately comes down to being between Jay and Adam, but Adam wins, as we've kind of already discussed. That just, the extra willpower he had combined with something that, he's physically capable of, and knowing how important it was to get it this time.
Yeah. Well, and just real quick aside, the one that you're referring to is the one that Will won.
Okay, yeah.
When they had their hands like above their heads, and we were talking about like how difficult that is. Like that was designed to be quick, and the will power of the couple that like made it that far. That's what made it take 90 minutes. And that was Will and Jessica, who both were. They both have that. I mean, they've got that drive for sure. So.
So in any case, though, Adam wins, and Will is more convinced than ever that now is the time to make his move. And Adam is in a good spot of being both safe from the immunity necklace and having an immunity idol. And so David's pretty confident that if Will is being honest with them, they have 5, because it's one swing over from the previous 5. What we came into this episode was 5 versus 4, but then one of the 5 has jumped over to the other side.
Right, and then here's, when I say that, like, this is where I really think Zeke, not that it would have made a difference, but this is where I think he misplayed this in this episode. Is rather than self-reflect and think maybe my alliance isn't as strong as I thought it was, and maybe everybody isn't for me the way I thought it was, he decides that David's calm demeanor, which was accurate to understand that David would not act the way that he was had he not felt confident, because David isn't like that. He correctly identified the first part, but the reasoning behind it, he mistook as, well, David must have an idol.
If he keeps finding idols, he has a nose for him. That must be it. Yeah,
as opposed to I mistook who was for me, and I need to go shore up my alliance.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't know that it makes a difference. However, he definitely misplayed that because of doing that. And then, he picked Ken, who Will liked, and it started this snowball effect of everything going out of control.
Well, I thought for a while that the whole thing might fall apart, this idea of getting Zeke out, just because of some of the stuff that proceeds to happen here. But you're right. I think that Zeke correctly observed that something was up, but then faced the possibility of 2 different reasons something might be up, figured that one was more likely than the other, and we know that he guessed wrong. So, would it have made a difference if he had figured it out? Maybe. But it seemed like Will was pretty determined at that point. I don't know that he could have been talked back into the fold.
Yeah, but if Zeke, I agree that it might have been too far. I'll preface it with that. However, you give yourself a chance if you correctly identify that something's up. You
no question. Yeah, I'm definitely with you there.
He identifies that Will is the most vocal, and then you make some, whether it's true or not, some deal, some promise, some reassurance that you defer to him to make him feel respected, let him choose who gets to go. If you touch into the Will's insecurities, you perhaps win him back. But if you wait until tribal when you find out that that's in fact the case, and then you're making a pitch in tribal when it's probably too late,
yeah,
you're in trouble,
Yeah. So in any case, Zeke has decided that David must have an idol, so let's switch the vote to Ken. Will is talking to the rest of this group, saying he doesn't feel respected by Zeke's group. And again, there's an aspect, even for me taking my notes, of saying, where did that come from? He's never expressed that before, or at least not on camera that we saw. But he finds himself having to sell his loyalty to Ken, who is wary of it, which, despite the fact that Ken his style is not optimally suited to the way the rest of the people are playing this game, but at the same time, it's like he's also not 100% wrong that Will is an opportunist and not really loyal in any sense.
Right.
So from that perspective, his instincts are correct. It's kind of like, you are promising now that you will betray the alliance you're currently with. Why should we trust you? And so we can understand that perspective, even though I think the way he handles it is not really optimal for his own game, in the sense that he's making himself difficult to work with, even for the other people that are seriously supposed to be with him. But Will is having to sell his loyalty so hard that he finally basically just says, look, it's you that they want to target. And all of a sudden Ken's just like, what? I don't believe you. So I'm going to declare this to the whole camp that, what? Is somebody talking about me? What's going on? That's what Will said. He just goes and gets Jay, and then everyone else comes up, and Will is just like, what has just happened?
It was unorthodox.
Yeah.
Yet effective. I
know what it was effective at is creating chaos in what could have otherwise been a slam dunk. You know what I mean? If Ken had just said, "Oh, you're going to switch to our side? That's great. Now we'll have the numbers and we can vote out Zeke." Instead, he makes it chaos again. So
he did inadvertently burn another idol, though.
Yeah. So that's the weird thing, is that, like, Ken is he's weirdly not much of a team player, despite seeming like loyalty is such a big deal to him. Like, he's loyal but not cooperative. Does that sound right to you?
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
In any case, Ken goes to Jay, asks him to confirm what Will said. Everybody ends up discussing it. Will now is defending that nobody was listening to him, and then Jay pretty much straight out tells him, it's like, well, then you were not communicating your frustration to us very well, because we had no idea that you felt that way. It's like, listen, you can't put it all on us. It's not our job to seek you out and make sure that you have communicated what you feel to us and then give you exactly what you want. Like, you have to put yourself forward. Anyway, though, at the same time, Will is 18. He's
such a millennial.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. We should maybe at the end briefly talk about that article that you found.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So in any case, though, Zeke is annoyed that Will went and told Ken what was going on, but he's also feeling like, and yet, I actually do still need him, because at this point, if, like, his instinct, as he had done previously with David and with Hannah, if his instinct is to say, oh, Will turned on me, now let's everybody vote for him, he's realizing, oh, wait, we really can't actually do that now because the other side is now united enough against me that if I try to switch the target to Will, it will just guarantee me getting sent home. So that's not great for me. Meanwhile, Adam is just beside himself at what Ken has done in terms of saying, we had a double agent in our pocket and the numbers going into tribal council as a surprise. And you just blew the whole thing up in front of everybody. And at the same time, I think Ken could have rightly said, you were not the one whose name was getting thrown around.
Also true.
So in any case, Will is briefly considering switching his vote back because of how mad he is at Ken. And at least at a certain point, the editing is trying to convince us that that's actually his plan. Actually, I'm just wanting to double check that he did, in fact, vote for Zeke. I think he did, right?
I got it here.
Yeah.
Will voted for Zeke. Yep.
Yeah, because I was thinking he must have, just based on the way the votes were read, is that I think even without the idol that Zeke would have gone home. Because if it was 5 votes for Hannah, all that did not count, I think they would have shown all of them.
Yeah, it was. So Brett, Jay, Sunday, and Zeke voted for Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
Will, Ken, Hannah,
Mm-hmm.
David, and Adam voted for Zeke.
Yeah. So I think despite Will being that mad at Ken, probably still recognized that if he can calm himself down a little bit more, Zeke is still the threat that he had been, that Will had identified him as earlier. And his anger at Ken was not a good reason to vote Ken out instead of Zeke. Or to try to get Ken out, rather. Especially since it wouldn't be Ken anyway. Although they didn't know that for sure.
Right. And so here's my next point in where the potentially Zeke's misplay by being so convinced that, and again, I'm going to preface this with, I'm not sure it would have mattered because of everything being out in the open like that. But by him being so convinced that David had the idol and his concern that, okay, if we stick with Ken, then David will know to use his idol on Ken. So we have to switch the votes. It's another misplay potentially because 2 things could have happened is that, Will could have said, you know what, I'll go one more round because I'm pissed off at, because he's emotional. I'm mad at Ken. So yeah, he did that to me. I'll help you get rid of him.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Adam still has the idol. So if it's clear they're voting for Ken, then he could have played his idol and had it actually been useful.
Yeah.
So it's not a guarantee, but it's still, Zeke did not give himself a chance because he was he for whatever reason in his mind had convinced himself that David had an idol because of his calm demeanor.
Mm-hmm.
And that impacted the way that he made decisions the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, oh, that's why David's calm, because Will's fucking on their side.
Right. It was a tough choice, though, being in that position, knowing it's like, well, because at that point, going into the tribal council, he knows that Will is potentially up for grabs, right? And so you're right.
Yeah.
So, I agree with you that there's this idea that if they had been willing to vote for Ken instead of Hannah, maybe Will would have been more likely to join them on that. But they're also vying against this idea that an idol could get played. He assumes that it would come from David. It ends up coming from Adam. That they have to try to guess who they're going to play the idol for. Mm-hmm. And he thinks that if we try to sway Will by planning Ken, it's going to be too easy for the other side to recognize that that's who we're going for. And they're just going to play the idol for Ken, and then what's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a gamble, right?
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think this was that was his major misplay. My point.
Well, no, I agree. So I'm sorry.
Just that once he had built that in his head, he could never get out of that idea, mm-hmm. even when shown that wasn't what was going on with David.
Yeah,
that kind of jammed up his game.
Yeah,
so
I think it's like some of these decisions that we're talking about now. At least as far as I'm concerned, they're not so much as bad decisions as much as, with hindsight, he made the wrong call. But it's not necessarily that he should have guessed it before, because based on the information he had, you couldn't know either way. He had to guess.
For the most part. The only one, going back to when I originally made the comment, that I feel like he could have done more to try to shore up his alliance when he saw David was being calm. He could have recognized that there was potentially a break in it, mm-hmm. and try to identify that through genuine relationship conversations, and then shore that up without having to make it like a big thing.
Mm-hmm. Although, I mean, one of the things
that's where I think he missed.
Yeah. Well,
the rest of it, yes, he made choices once that decision was made, and that's why I think that first decision, that this is what is most like making that first guess without mm-hmm. going and doing a little.
But here's where I'm not disagreeing with you precisely, because we can look at the results and see obviously that he was unsuccessful in trying to do that. But what I think we've observed about his game previously, and has even been commented on by other players, is how much of an effort Zeke has seemed to make of trying to have conversations with everybody. And that's what we've complimented him on that in the past. And I don't think there's any reason to believe that he stopped doing that. But it's also, without question, that if he was continuing to do it this time, he was unsuccessful, at least in Will's case, that Will was slipping away without Zeke realizing it. And so even if he was trying, he was not. He was unsuccessful in his attempt.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I'm just saying that I don't want to criticize him for not talking with people, because I think what we had seen previously was that he was talking with people. However, what we can definitely say is it clearly wasn't enough in this case. So.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, because obviously, right? Because it didn't work. He was wrong that he thought Will was with him, and he wasn't. So it's pretty hard to argue with the fact of it, right? So in any case, though, there's this uncertainty from Zeke's side. Who should we try to put the votes on so that the idol won't disrupt it? Will is still kind of up for grabs as far as we can tell from the editing. I mean, I think ultimately what it came down to for Will is that once he kind of took a deep breath and counted to 10 about his anger with Ken, recognized that his original assessment, Zeke is the threat, Zeke needs to go, was still the smart thing.
Yeah, which is why it was interesting that he got, or potentially gets drunk with power, is it felt like this was a fairly measured decision by him after some somewhat emotional plays. Mm-hmm. And then we see in the previews that he doesn't necessarily take that and continue to play measured.
Well, it's kind of like gambler's fallacy. It was a little bit like what happened to Zeke this time, right? Zeke came into this episode on a high, like he had just accomplished something incredible, when really what happened is, due to dumb luck of drawing rocks, he managed to have his side come out on top. When it 50-50 could have gone the other way. So even though Zeke has played a good game up to this point, with some room for criticism in some areas, but good overall, I think.
That's part of what makes him a threat.
Right, exactly. And so, but at the same time, he was so confident coming into this episode that might have been what blinded him to Will's dissatisfaction. But what might be the same thing for Will going forward is that he had been feeling for a long time like people weren't listening to him, and how much of that is on them and how much of that is on him is hard to say for us, right? For us, the viewers. But in any case, he has been feeling that way, like he's not as involved as he wants to be. And so this is the time he made his big move, and there was a lot of stress and chaos. But overall, in the end, it went his way.
Yep.
And so it would be easy, especially for someone who's, is still very much in his emotional maturing phase, because everybody is at that age, to kind of take that and run with it. To say, I made this happen. I've got the ball now. I'm going to run with it.
True.
Right, so I could definitely see that being part of what's going on, but we also don't know for sure how valid that preview is. Like some who knows what really happens, right? But at the same time, it seems like a plausible direction for him to go after what happens here. So in any case, though, at the tribal council, David pretty much just lays it out of just like, nope, here's what's happening. We've got, two equal sides with Will in the middle. And lots of discussion about Will saying people treat him like a kid. And it's also true that a lot of people in the group do seem to talk to Jeff about why Will shouldn't feel the way he feels. And so, from Will's perspective, I can totally see how, he is now expressing, I did not feel respected by you guys. And then to have 4 or 5 people then turn to another person, Jeff in this case, and say, here's why Will shouldn't feel disrespected. That's, you know what I mean? That's going to feel in his head like, that's what I'm talking about. But at the same time, it's also a little unfair. I mean, they're on a TV show where they're specifically being questioned by a host. They're supposed to talk to the Jeff and to the camera.
Also true.
But at the same time, oddly, it was interesting that the tribal council finishes and goes to votes, kind of framing it about Jay as the one person who, after all of that, really turns to Will and says, just go with your gut, man. And it is for everything Will has been sort of asking for from everybody else, that's really, in the tribal council at least, the first time we see anyone actually do what Will is asking for, which is to talk to him and validate his feelings and his opinion.
Right, which to what might be considered Adam's only misplay in this episode, which I don't think it was. But Jay saying that, Adam hears it, and so I actually think it was a good play, depending on, I don't know Adam's state of mind, if he was always just going to do this, or if he hears that and is like, man, they've made a couple good arguments to Will, and Jay really just sold it. I need to be sure. I don't know that's what happened.
Mhm.
So, but I like to think that, Adam made a good decision.
Oh, playing his idol, you mean?
What? Yeah, with his idol.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right. That's what I'm saying. That could be the one thing that could be considered his misplay in this episode is using an idol on somebody that didn't have the majority votes.
Like, it turns out, this is, again, it's kind of like what we were saying earlier, where it's like, with hindsight, it's, he didn't need to have played the idol.
Right.
It would have gone the same way if he hadn't played it, and he could have still had it. And, like, so, certainly, that's a regrettable position, but it's always a gamble, right? And so, you're right that, like, with hindsight, it was the wrong decision. But, going into when he made it, we kind of went to the votes on the note of Will saying, yes, Jay is the only person who has treated me with respect, and Jay is on the other side.
Yep. Right. Which is why I wanted to point that out in favor of Adam.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Making that decision, even though it ultimately was not necessary and was in hindsight incorrect.
Yeah.
Based on the information he had at the time, which was very much amplified by what Jay did. Mm-hmm. This was the right thing for Adam to do.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I agree sort of like with both halves of it, right? Because obviously, in hindsight, if he had been able to see the future, he would not have played it. But failing that, when you have to guess based on the information available to you, it does seem like a reasonable conclusion to draw. And so it was not a bad decision, even if it ultimately turned out to be the wrong one, which is an interesting nuance that I just feel like sometimes doesn't come up in various sorts of situations that it maybe should. The idea that something can be the wrong decision without it having been a bad decision, and by the same token, something could be a bad decision that turns out to be the right call. Like you can be right for the wrong reasons or wrong for the right reasons, so to speak. Like you could make the right choice based on a statistical model and have the outcome be an outlier, where you still made the smart choice and it just turned out in that instance was wrong. Or you could also make a choice that statistically is a very long shot and yet in that instance turns out to be correct.
Yes.
In any case, 4 votes for Hannah did not count. I think one of Probst's favorite things to do on this show is reading votes that don't count because of an idol. I feel like I can just, I feel like he just really enjoys that.
Yeah, I can see that.
The drama of it. Hannah does not count. Pull out another one. Hannah does not count. Anyway. So Zeke is voted out, and I'm sad to see him go because I like him. I would definitely like to have him back on another season. But at the same time, like his own self-assessment of his game, which was, I think when I decided to start going after David and his side, that was maybe a little too early, and I pushed it a little too hard, and that made me a target. And it's like, yep, that's pretty much exactly what happened from our perspective.
Oh yeah, like he's very astute when he kind of looks back on things.
Yeah. Well,
so,
and
I'd love to see him again because I think the learning experience of having gone through a season will do wonders for him because he is really smart.
Yeah.
And I would definitely enjoy him being back because like I said, I think he would perform very, very well after having been through a season. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so we already kind of talked about the preview a little bit. Will wants to take charge, but Adam's not happy about it. I think that's really all I had notes for.
Me too.
All right, so I think that'll probably do it then this time for this episode of Talking About Survivor, and we'll be back next week. I think there's just one more episode and then the finale. Is that right? I couldn't find a schedule when I was trying to look it up earlier.
How many people are left? Let's see.
Right, so we just went from 9 to 8 this time because it was the 5 versus 4.
So 8 to 7.
And then starting a finale with 7 is possible. And this is also episode 12. I feel like frequently we have an episode 13 before the finale.
Yeah.
So that's a guess, but I haven't seen an actual schedule to confirm it.
Yeah, you're right. That's a possibility. Damn. Right up in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also that time of year, we're into December now, so, getting about time for they usually finish it up before the holidays.
Yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me if there were 2.
So there's going to be one more on the 7th, and then they might have their Wednesday finale on the 14th.
Oh, yeah, they're doing Wednesday finales now. True. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's not the same as where you have to calculate a Wednesday, Sunday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So in any case, we will do episodes when they do episodes, whenever that turns out to be.
We will.
Because I've not actually seen anything confirming that schedule. It just seems possible. So.
All right.
All right, so thank you, everybody, for listening and or watching, and we'll be back next week for however many episodes they're going to have.
Yep.